What's up, Scoop Podcast? I'm your host, Erica Krupin, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking about insurance for your business because I always say you don't need insurance until you need it. So you want to make sure that you have it. And I am really excited because I have Coleen on from Pet Sitters Insurance to go over some of the information, the nitty-gritty, what we need to know. What's up, Coleen?
Hi, Erica. Thanks so much for having me here today to talk about the exciting world of insurance.
Exciting. I'm glad that you're excited about it because when I think about insurance, I get anxiety, I get overwhelmed. I'm like, do I have the right coverage? What
Mhm.
happens if something happens? And so I know I'm not the only one that has these questions. A lot of us business owners, we get into business because we have hopes and we have dreams and we have visions and we're not in the insurance world and it can be really really confusing and when you need the insurance and something happens, you want to make sure that we're properly covered. And so I'm really pumped up that you're going to help educate the community.
Exactly. Insurance is confusing, and it's
Yeah.
important to have somebody on your side who can explain it to you and help you out when you have questions.
Perfect. Well, before we hop into, before I ask you all the questions, how about you give the listeners your highlight reel?
Awesome. So I've been an insurance underwriter for 22 years. As an underwriter, my job is to work with the insurance company as well as the association in this case to make sure that we have the proper coverages and pricing in place for the business. I work specifically with Pet Sitters Associates, or PSA for short. So when I'm talking about the coverage provided, I'm specifically talking about Pet Sitters Associates. So any other insurance might be slightly different. So that's something to keep in mind for your listeners. Pet Sitters Associates is a little bit unique, but I've been working with them also from the beginning. They first started in 1998, and I started working with them in 2023 or 2003. It's so weird to talk about that far back, but yeah, it's been about 21 years now.
I know it. I feel like ever since 2020, everything just kind of blurs together. It's
And I feel
very
like when people say something was 20 years ago because of my age, I think 1990s. And I realize, oh, that's actually after 2000.
Yes, that's so true. When I think of 30 years ago, I think of the 70s. For me, when I think of 20 years ago, I think of the 80s. I don't know why, but that's totally skewed. It's
Yes.
it's so weird. All right, well, cool. So you've been in the game for a really long time. You know your stuff. I'm excited that we're going to talk specifically about the pet sitters insurance because I know this is targeted towards people in the dog and pet industry. And do you know off the top of your head when did you guys add pooper scoopers to your docket?
It was always from the beginning. So
Okay.
Pet Sitters Associates, I know it says pet sitters, so people think that that's what they do, but their basic membership provides coverage for pet sitters, dog walkers, pooper scoopers, pet taxis, and then you can add on additional coverages if you offer services beyond that. But pooper scoopers are just right in there with the pet sitters.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Because when I was doing my research online, it was hard. Like I was very confused. And me personally, I went with a local person through like a broker because I didn't know. I didn't
Mhm.
understand. Because when you see something online, especially for my generation, it's like, am I going to get the good coverage? Can I trust them? And I think other people have that. So let's kind of hop into the questions that our community has and questions that I have. So for pet sitter associates, what type of insurance do you offer?
So, the PSA basic membership, which everybody has to have, when you join as a member, you automatically get the basic insurance. And that provides you with commercial general liability coverage, as well as coverage for injuries to the animals in your care. So, commercial general liability, as a sort of general explanation, provides coverage for bodily injury and property damage to third party persons. It also provides a lot of other automatic coverages that don't really apply to the pet care industry, but they're kind of just automatically thrown in on a commercial general liability policy. So there's coverage for things like personal and advertising injury. But that is libel, slander, defamation of character that you are accused of as the pet sitter or the pooper scooper. So, for example, if you are out talking to your clients and you say something negative about another business and
Mm.
it's not true, that other business could sue you for slander if it's spoken, or libel if it's written, or defamation of character. And if they can prove that you lied about that situation, our policy can jump in and provide you with some coverage. It's also in advertising. So if you put on your website that Joe Schmo Pooper Scooper is really, really bad, and you don't have anything to back that up, and he sues you for it, there's some advertising coverage there too, or for trademark infringement. We really don't see a lot of those kinds of claims, but it's nice to know that the coverage is in there. The basic membership also automatically provides coverage for lost keys. So if the member accidentally loses their client's key while out on a walk, or if their car is broken into, or their purse is stolen and client keys go missing, we'll provide up to $2,000 in coverage to rekey the client's home. And we actually do see quite a few claims under that. Also within the PSA basic membership is coverage for injuries to the animals themselves. And I know as pooper scoopers, you're probably not interacting with the animals a lot, but things can happen. Like if you were to accidentally leave a gate open and the client dog were to escape and run out and get hit by a car, our policy would provide coverage for that. Something unique about the pet sitter policy is there are two different portions of the policy that potentially provide coverage for injuries to the client pet. And again, these are provided in the basic membership. The first portion is what we call the veterinarian expense coverage, and that provides up to $1,000 of coverage for injuries to a client pet, regardless of negligence or legal liability on the part of the pet sitter. That's a really special coverage that you get as a member of Pet Sitters Associates, because normally, for insurance to kick in, there must be some negligence or legal liability. So in essence, you either have to have done something wrong, or there has to be something that you could have done differently to have prevented the claim. The second portion of the policy, which again is included in the basic membership, provides up to $15,000 of coverage per occurrence, or $30,000 annually, for injuries to the client pet. But for that higher limit to come into play, there must be some negligence or legal liability on your part. And I know it sounds weird that you get more insurance when you're negligent, but like I said, normally insurance requires negligence or legal liability. So that $1,000 of coverage that doesn't require negligence is special to our association. And then we have an option for $50 where you can actually pay more to get higher limits. That expense, no negligence, goes from $1,000 to $2,500. And the $15,000 that requires negligence goes from $15 to $25 for an extra $50. So the example that I gave of the pooper scooper leaving a gate open, the dog gets out, runs out and getting hit by a car. It's pretty obvious in my mind there's some negligence there because you left the gate open, right? And that's going to fall into that higher category. And again, that's all encompassed in our basic membership.
Okay. All right. Wow. That was a lot of good information. I have some follow-up questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right. So with the gate situation, say for instance, the dog gets let out after your service, but you closed that gate and you took a photo and you put that into your CRM with a timestamp. And it just so happened maybe a kid or a landscaper or some other service provider left that gate open and you're getting blamed for it.
I'm sorry, that's a great example. And by the way, if you guys are doing that, that is awesome to take that documentation that you closed the gate. I think that's a great idea to do that. If that were to happen, so let's say the owner of the dog accuses you of having left the gate open. You have that photo, but I would still recommend, as soon as the client starts accusing you and asking you to provide reimbursement for their dog's vet expenses, I would go ahead and submit a claim to your insurance company. In the case of Pet Sitters Associates, if there's documentation that obviously you closed the gate and somebody else let it open, we're probably not going to cover the claim, but we'll still defend you. So if it goes to a court situation, we'll provide you with defense costs. So that's a really important thing. If you don't have that photo documentation and it's a he said, she said situation, the claims adjusters will fully investigate and do their best to determine what is right. I think insurance companies sometimes get kind of a bad rap in the media that they're always trying to not pay claims. I can speak for the insurance company that we work with that if it is a justified and legit claim, they are going to pay it. They're not trying to get out of claims. They're also not going to pay claims that they're not responsible for, of course, but they're not trying to find sneaky ways of getting out of paying the claim. But I do love the idea of taking a photo of the gate.
Yeah, because a lot of us are. And I know I'm really promoting that because I personally have been blamed for a dog being let out. My technician said, "Hey, I closed the gate." But I don't know. I didn't know what actually happened. Luckily, the dogs made it home. And so after that, I made it standard policy. I built that trigger into our CRM that all of us must take a photo of the gate and email it to the customer before we can even close the job out. So we have that protection. I love that you said that you you will get legal assistance. So, how much is the coverage for legal assistance if this does go to litigation?
So, a great thing about our policy is the defense is outside the limits of insurance. Sometimes insurance policies, the defense costs are inside the limits. And that's a really important thing to find out about your specific insurance policy. So, I'll use an example of let's say that you're negligent. So you're going to get $15,000 in coverage for the injury to that client dog. It's hit by a car. It's really bad, really badly injured, lots of surgeries, lots of stuff. Well, if this ends up going to court, and let's say the defense costs are $10,000, our defense costs are outside the limit. So that full $15,000 is still available for the vet expenses. But if the defense costs are inside the limits, that 15,000 is now shrunken down to only $5,000. So something to be aware of your insurance policy is the defense inside the limits or outside the limits. So in essence, there is no limit on how much defense we could provide because it's not a limited part of the policy. I mean, that being said, if it starts getting kind of crazy, the insurance company starts looking at trying to settle things because, they're not going to spend $1 million defending a $15,000 claim.
Yeah, true. Okay. Now, do you have to, this is for people in the United States, do you have to be a DBA or an LLC to get insurance coverage?
With Pet Sitters Associates, all memberships are actually in the name of an individual. We can cover your DBA or your LLC as the business name, but our program is set up so that the membership and insurance policy is in the name of an individual so that you, Erica, are covered when working for yourself. Or if you work as an independent contractor for another pooper scooper business, you would have coverage for that as well because we're covering you as an individual. But if you do have an LLC or a DBA trade name or a partnership name that you want to put as your business name on your membership, we would also cover that entity if it is sued as well.
Okay. So if you have staff, like say for instance, I have a couple staff members, do we have to have an additional policy on each one of those employees if they
No.
are? Okay, go ahead.
So the basic membership is going to cover one person.
Okay.
And then you can add on coverage for your spouse, partner, employees, or independent contractors for an additional charge. And that is prorated as the year goes on. So if you add someone midterm, it's not the full annual charge, but you do have to add them on individually. Employees for sure need to be paid for. Independent contractors, if they are also a member of Pet Sitters Associates, we don't require that you list them on your membership because any claim that they have will just go under their membership. So we don't like to ask you, Erica, to also pay for Mary if Mary is also a Pet Sitters Associates member because it kind of feels like we're double charging. That doesn't really seem fair. So if Mary's working for you and a claim happens, the claim just goes under Mary's membership instead of yours, Erica. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. And so for the listeners, I just want to clear this up just in case you're a little confused on how independent contractors work versus like W 2 employees. A W 2 employee works for you. You are providing coverage for them. If you're hiring independent contractors, that independent contractor needs to have their own business entity and they also need to have their own set of insurance in order to work for you. If you start to muddy the waters and you have somebody on as an independent contractor that really should be a W 2 employee, you can get yourself into some serious hot water when you get audited. It's not if you get audited, it's when you get audited because it's going to happen eventually. Because I'm getting audited right now. It happens every single year.
Yeah, and keep in mind that some people think the only difference between an employee and an independent contractor is as a W-2 versus a 1099, but there are more things involved in that. And I am not an expert on it, but if you Google it, there's a lot of information online of what makes an employee versus an independent contractor. A lot of it is the tax stuff, but it's also things like, did they provide their own tools? Did you train them? Are you giving them guidance and controlling everything they do like an employee, or is it really you're just handing it off to them as an independent contractor? So I would recommend to people to talk with a tax advisor to figure out that for themselves in their own specific situation, because that is not my forte.
Yeah, I hear this a lot where they're like, "Well, I don't want to pay the taxes, so I'm just going to hire them as like an independent contractor." And that's like you said, like we're not tax professionals, we're not lawyers or anything, but we've learned a lot. You learn things as business goes on. Yeah, if you're telling them when to start and stop, you're telling them how to scoop the yard, you're telling them what to wear, you're buying all the supplies and you're doing all of that stuff. That is that's an employee, right?
Absolutely.
But if you're saying, "Hey, I got this job. Here's the contact information. Just make sure it's done, and then I will pay you," or however that works, then that a lot of times will fall under an independent contractor. But you can't control that person. They do things how they're going to do it because it's their own business.
Absolutely. And something else to keep in mind, every state is different. I am not a workers' compensation expert, but in most states, you're going to be required to have workers' compensation for your employees. And usually, workers' compensation is not even available for independent contractors or the owner of the business. Sometimes it is, so it's worth checking because some states are different than others. But keep in mind, if you have employees, more likely than not, you're also required to have workers' comp, because a policy like Pet Sitters Associates, again, which is a commercial general liability policy, we specifically exclude coverage for injuries to the members, employees, and independent contractors and their family members. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind, even if you don't have employees. So if you're a individual and you work by yourself, you don't have any employees, you need to keep in mind that if you have a commercial general liability policy, there's no coverage in that for your injuries. So if a client dog bites you, my recommendation would be to ask the owner of the dog to submit a claim with their homeowners or renters insurance. I'm not a personal lines insurance expert. I do mostly commercial insurance, but the large majority of homeowners and renters insurance policies are going to provide coverage for injuries caused by owned pets. My personal homeowners policy provides me with coverage if my dog is in my care, or if she's in the care of a pet sitter, or even if she's at large, they call it. So if she escapes and runs out without anybody taking care of her, my policy still provides me with coverage for that liability. Because in most states, the owner of the dog is responsible for anything that their dog does, regardless if they are in their care. So that's the first thing that I would do if I got bit as a pet sitter or a pooper scooper, is I'd ask my client to submit a claim with their homeowners or renters insurance. And on the off chance they don't have insurance, or they don't have insurance that covers their dog, maybe their dog has a bite history, or it's a quote unquote aggressive breed and they don't have insurance for it, they are likely still responsible for your injuries. But if they don't have insurance, it gets more complicated because now you're doing lawsuits and all of that kind of stuff. So something to keep in mind, if I was a pet sitter and I was putting together a contract for my clients, something that I would consider adding as a question is asking them for confirmation that they have a homeowners or renters insurance policy that provides animal liability coverage. Because that would help me know if I get injured, they're going to protect me and I'm going to get some coverage if their dog bites me. But it also helps you know that if that dog gets out of that gate and they bite a third party person, our policy will provide some coverage, but the pet owner should also be responsible. It's their dog. So knowing that they have a homeowners or renters insurance policy is sort of just an extra would make me extra comfortable if I was the pet sitter.
Okay. Yeah, that is a really good idea to find out because when we had our recent dog bite, the woman was like, I don't have any type of insurance at all. And so she was literally freaking out. But luckily, I have workman's comp. And so that was the other question I wanted to ask. You did briefly go over them. So, if you can,
Mhm.
general liability is separate from workman's comp, correct?
Correct. A commercial general liability policy is providing coverage for bodily injury to third party persons. So, as a pet sitter, if you take a dog on a walk and the dog bites someone on the sidewalk, or you take the dog to the dog park or the dog beach and they're off leash and they bite somebody, our policy would provide coverage for their injuries. But again, a lot of times the state says there's some fault because they were in the care of the pet sitter, but there's also fault on the dog owner. So a lot of times the dog owner's homeowners or renter's insurance gets pulled in as well if they have insurance because they're also partially responsible for the injuries, even though they weren't there. It's their dog, and the dog is kind of an extension of them.
Right.
But then the
Okay.
workers' compensation is an entirely separate policy, and that's going to cover injuries to a employee uh, by a dog, obviously, as an example, but also other things. So if you have an employee and they are getting out of their car and they are coming up to the client's house and they trip on the curb, the homeowner's policy might cover that, but your workers' compensation would also step in. So it's not necessarily an injury caused by the pet or an injury caused at the client's home, which again might be covered by a homeowner's or renter's policy, but the workers' comp will also jump in for those other things as well.
Okay, because I know that was something I was confused about in the beginning. So if something happens to your staff, don't be trying to go to your general liability policy because that's not where the coverage kicks in.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, why doesn't pet sitters have workman's comp insurance?
We have looked into it in the past. The challenge is that every state is very different in regards to work comp laws. And it's just very complicated to write a master policy that covers workers' compensation. So, Pet Sitters Associates is what we call a master policy program. All of the members of the association are covered by one policy number. So, when you look at our member certificates, the policy number is the same every time. But then each member gets their own unique membership ID number, which is a 5-digit number, and that's unique to them. And each member gets their own set of limits. So one member's claims don't impact the limits that are available for another member. And that's also an important thing to look for. Some associations, it's not as common as it once was, but some associations will have one limit that's like an umbrella over everything. And once that's maxed out, there's no coverage left for the other members. So it can be a little sketchy of like, I didn't have any claims, but that guy did, and that guy did, and that lady did. And oh, now there's no coverage left for me. But Pet Sitters Associates is written that each member gets their own limits. But having a master policy like that allows us to keep the premiums down, kind of the law of large numbers, we call it in insurance. You got a lot of people, you can charge less at the individual rate because you're getting enough premium from the group to cover everything. But workers' compensation is just so unique state by state that it would be really difficult to write it in that format. So it's just something that we've never pursued. And instead, the member can go to a local agent who really understands those state laws. I just feel like that's a better option for the pet sitter and the pooper scooper.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I need like let's try to remember this. My buddy William started it's a poop scoop millionaire group and it's a community of pooper scoopers and I think right now he's either at like 130 or 150 community members and he's looking for specific like vendors to have within the community to recommend. I would love to get you two in touch because that's a common topic about insurance. So if you can
Absolutely.
remind me because sometimes I get a little squirrely and I don't want to forget. Okay. All right, cool. So we covered some really good stuff. So if somebody is because I want to ask two questions. What does somebody need to get started with this insurance?
To get started, it's really, really easy. It's all online. So the website address is PetSitLLC.com. Again, PetSitLLC.com. And we are Pet Sitters Associates. There are other associations with similar names. That's why I keep saying it. We're Pet Sitters Associates. When you get to the website, there's an Apply Now tab. You just fill in the information, your name, your address, select the optional coverages that you want to purchase for your membership. And if you pay with a credit card, your coverage can be effective at the date and time of purchase or any other future date. If you join today and you want to have July 1st as your day, just it's easy to remember, you can just update that on the website, very easy. Otherwise, it will automatically do the date and time of purchase. And it is the date and time of purchase. You can't have a claim in the morning and then join in the afternoon. We track that. So if you pay by a check, which is also an option, coverage would be effective on the postmark date. And so keep in mind, if you decide to pay by check, your coverage is going to be delayed a little bit while we make sure that we get the postmark date and all of that kind of good stuff. It's all online. And when you join, or when you're doing the Apply Now tab, you create a username and password, and that gives you access to our member login area. In the member login area, you can find your member certificate, which is your confirmation of coverage. You can also find in our resource library copies of old newsletters, logos to use in your marketing, some checklists that you can use in your business. But also in the member login area is where you can make changes. So if during your membership term you move and you need to change your address, or if you add on an employee or independent contractor, or you decide that you're going to start offering another service that requires an optional coverage, like you're going to start doing dog grooming, you would want to add on the grooming coverage. You can do that all yourself via the website. It's very user-friendly. I am not tech savvy, so it's very user-friendly, but it's all managed yourself. And then you'll get some reminders to renew when the time comes. The renewals are not automatic, and that's something that we decided to do very intentionally. We want the member to have to consciously decide to renew and have an opportunity to review their membership and make sure they don't need to make any changes to addresses or coverages. But again, it's all really, really easy on the website, but you do have to go in and renew.
Will the company send reminders? Say, hey, you
Yes.
need to renew. Okay, good.
Yeah, we send a letter in the mail, which is why it's important to have a good mailing address. We do send a letter in the mail, but they also send email reminders as well.
Oh, yeah, because I'd forget. I'd be uninsured after a year.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it sounds like, okay, we get started. We have, it's us as a business owner. Maybe we have one or two employees. What's the coverage and the limits look like for these big dog companies? We're talking the companies are doing 600,000, $1 million a year. They have maybe 15, 16, 20 trucks running. A lot of moving parts. At what point does your guys' coverage not work for them?
So our policy is written where you really can add as many employees or independent contractors as you want. There's a charge for each of them. So sometimes it gets to a point where they have so many employees or independent contractors that it doesn't make sense anymore just from a cost perspective. But from a limits perspective or coverage perspective, we're totally fine with that. And we do have some members who have 20 or 30 employees or independent contractors. But I would say that's more of a factor than the size. We do not ask you your revenue, and our rates and premiums are not limited by your revenue. So if you're a $600,000 pooper scooper business, yay for you. And you're totally fine to still join Pet Sitters Associates and have your commercial general liability through us. Because you mentioned trucks, I want to jump in on that real quick. We do not provide auto liability. We do provide coverage if, as a pet sitter, you are transporting a dog. So if you put a dog in your car, drive it to the dog park or to the grooming salon or the vet's office, and you get in a car accident and the dog gets injured. And when I say dog, I also mean cats, any kind of pet.
Right.
But if the dog gets injured in the car accident, we'll provide coverage under our vet expense or the coverage that $1,000, that $15,000 I talked about earlier, that would apply in a car accident as well. But we do not provide auto liability. So if that car accident causes an injury to a third-party person or property damage to a third-party person, that's going to fall under your auto insurance. So you want to make sure that you're talking with a local agent to make sure that you have proper auto insurance in place. In some cases, your personal auto is going to be fine. In other cases, you're going to need a commercial auto insurance policy. And that is something to speak with a local agent about. Make sure that you have the right coverage for your auto insurance.
Okay. So what if, let's say for instance, we're backing out of a vehicle, we're backing out we run over somebody's mailbox because that happens.
It does happen, and I see quite a few of those. Unfortunately, that is not going to be covered by our policy. That is an auto liability claim, so it's going to fall under your auto insurance because the damage was caused by your vehicle.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. All right, so let's stay on the same topic of the larger companies. I think of larger companies, there's more chance for liability. At what point, where if there's enough claims, would a drop happen in coverage where you can no longer be insured?
That's a great question. We don't have a 3 strikes and you're out type of policy. When I look at potentially non-renewing a member, it's very subjective. I look at a variety of things. How long have you been a member? How many claims have you had? How big were the claims? Is there a pattern of negligence, et cetera, et cetera? So with pet sitters, for example, if I see multiple claims where there's dog fights happening at dog daycares over and over and over, especially if they're larger or it appears that they're happening because the pet sitter was negligent, I take that into consideration a lot more than I worry about a lost key claim or small property damage claims. Because as an underwriter, I'm looking for frequency and severity. So is there a frequency issue where there's just way too many claims? This is going to be an issue. Frequency ends up being severity. That's sort of our thought in the insurance world. If there's a lot of small claims, the next one might be a big one. So we look at frequency, but we also look at the severity of those claims. And like I said, I also look at the types of claims. Is there a pattern here that I should be worried about? If you have 3 claims in 1 year, that's going to stand out to me a lot more than if you have 3 claims over a span of 5 or 6 years. So it's very subjective. And if we were to non-renew somebody, we send out non-renewal notice at least 90 days in advance to give the pet sitter member enough time to reach out if they have questions or concerns and to find new insurance elsewhere. And sometimes I've sent out those non-renewals and the person's called me and I've changed my mind. So, maybe most of the claims were involving one employee that no longer works for them. Or maybe they have made a major change to how their business is operated that would eliminate the things that I was worried about. So there is sometimes an opportunity for a conversation after I non-renew somebody. But I will say I don't change my mind often, but it has happened.
Okay, that makes sense, which now I have a couple other questions for that.
Yeah.
So I know, say for instance, if a dog gets out and they bite the staff member, that's not covered. But let's talk about some worst case scenarios. A dog's coming at you and a teammate either tries to defend themselves. So they maybe hit the dog with a rake or something or a dustpan and injures the dog. Or they use pepper spray on the dog because a lot of scoopers do that. And then worst case scenario, a scooper has actually shot a dog to defend themselves. If that were to happen, how do you think that situation would be handled on those 3 tiers?
So I'm going to preface this with my little disclaimer that all claims are paid based on the individual circumstances involved in that specific situation. So it's always difficult to talk about hypothetical claims because just because claim A is paid, claim B might not be because something might be different about it. So that's my little disclaimer before I talk about hypothetical claims. But we have paid claims where an animal was injured in self-defense, either the client animal or a third-party animal. We've had situations where a pet sitter has injured a third-party animal while trying to defend their client animal. So you step in between and then you kick that other dog to stop them from biting the client dog. That is considered part of the property damage, that there would be coverage for those kind of situations. It can get a little bit, I don't want it sketchy when you're trying to figure out what exactly happened in that situation if there aren't any other witnesses. But if it's in a self-defense situation, it's totally okay. We know you got to do what you got to do to protect yourself. So the one thing to keep in mind about pets is that legally they're considered property. So you and I, of course, consider our pets to be members of the family, but legally they're considered property. So to be blunt, the law does not look at my dog, who is my furry baby, as any more valuable than the couch she's laying on. She's property. So when a dog dies in a pet sitter's care, either in a defense situation like you're talking about now or an accidental situation with a pet sitter, the insurance company is going to look at the property value of that dog. So I'll use my own dog as an example. I adopted her for $350 7 years ago. Since then, I've invested tens of thousands of dollars into her because she's had lots of surgeries. And to me, she is absolutely priceless. But if she were to die in a pet sitter's care, the insurance company would likely say her value is $350 because that's how much it would cost to get a new dog of like kind and quality. Again, I realize that sounds really cold. That's not how our policy is written. It's actually the law. So there's no sentimental value. There's no pain and suffering. None of that is included when a dog dies because it's just considered legally property. But to add to that, if there are veterinarian expenses in an attempt to save the dog's life, obviously we would also cover those kinds of expenses. But when the actual death, or if the dog runs away and is never found, there's a point when, we'll keep looking for the dog for a while, but there's a point where a decision has to be made that that dog is not going to be found. And then again, we start looking at the replacement cost of the dog.
Okay. All right. I mean, this is the thing. It's cool. It's cold hard facts. I know we think like our dogs are priceless, but they are property.
And when you think about it from the perspective of if we were to start looking at pets as more than property, and we were to start, if the court systems were to start putting pain and suffering on those situations, that would have a really negative impact on the veterinarian industry. They would have to have much higher expenses for their insurance to cover the risks involved. And what if they make a mistake and they kill a dog? They're going to get sued for a lot more. And that something that when you look at it from that perspective, I think it makes some sense that we have to protect everyone who's involved in dealing with the animals.
No, that does make sense. So why should somebody go with your insurance versus for the general liability versus like your local state farm or local broker?
So State Farm's great. All those companies out there who offer pet sitting insurance, I'm not going to say anything negative about them. Any insurance is better than no insurance.
Right.
But the benefit of working with an association like Pet Sitters Associates is you're going to get special coverages that you're not likely going to get through a State Farm or just an independent insurance agent in your area. It's also likely going to be cheaper. As I mentioned earlier, the law of large numbers comes into play with associations. We're able to charge less to the individual member because everybody's covered together and everybody together makes enough premium. So insurance companies, in the end, they're businesses, right? They need to make enough money from the premium to cover the claims plus their expenses. So people don't always like to think of insurance companies that way, but they are a business and they have to make money. So they need to make sure that they're getting more premium than claims that are being paid. And in the individual policy, they're going to have to charge more. But on a master policy, we can charge less because on the individual members, because it all comes together to a larger premium. So that is one thing. But then also the coverages. So earlier we talked about that veterinarian expense coverage, the coverage that does not require negligence or legal liability. You're not going to get that. More likely than not, I guess I don't know all the policies out there. More likely than not, you're not going to be able to get that coverage through a State Farm or an independent insurance agent. The same thing with the lost key coverage, the coverage for rekeying a client's home. That typically is not going to be part of a traditional insurance policy. So associations, cheaper, better coverage.
Okay. What if somebody has a general liability policy with a local broker and they want to cancel with them and go with you guys, what's that conversation look like when they call their local broker that they've developed this relationship with and they're like nervous to call and cancel?
Well, I work with a lot of insurance agents in a different aspect of my job, and they usually are pretty understanding, especially if you tell them that you found an association. A good agent will probably want to look at the website and make sure that you are really getting the coverage that you need. Because a good agent, in my mind, even if they're losing the business, they still want you to have good insurance. So hopefully they would be receptive to the fact that there's this other option available that's cheaper and better for you. And, if they also write your workers' compensation or your auto insurance or your personal insurance, you're still going to benefit from that relationship that you've built with them. And they're still going to benefit from the commission they're getting off of those other lines of business. So, in my mind, if an agent is really grumpy about it, that doesn't seem like a great agent because you want them to want you to have the best insurance. So sometimes people will call me, pet sitters or potential pet sitter members will call and talk with me. And I have sometimes said, I don't know that we're the right fit for you. Maybe they offer services that are outside the scope of our program or whatever the case might be. Or they've decided that they want to leave for one reason or another. I still want them to have the right insurance. So I'm happy to give people guidance and point them in the right direction, even if in the end they aren't going to join Pet Sitters Associates and I'm going to get nothing out of it. I just want people to have good insurance. That's sort of my goal for all Americans. Have good insurance. Not that hard.
And insurance really helps. It gives a peace of mind. I'll tell a little story before I ask the next question. But this has to do with auto insurance. And then we've had dog bites too. So the first time one of my company vehicles got into an accident, I thought I was going to hemorrhage. I was so stressed out. I couldn't think straight, whatever. Then when it happened again, I actually was at a family member's house. We were having dinner and I was on the toilet using the restroom, and I get a message from my employee, my staff member. She was doing Sunday night roundup, like getting things prepared for Monday, and she got T-boned, a hit and run, completely totaled the vehicle.
Oh,
Okay, gathered my thoughts. I went out, went out to the table where Josh, my husband, and the family were eating, and I said, "Excuse me, we need to leave. Crystal has been into an accident and we need to go." And all their faces just dropped. They're
oh.
like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine. She's okay. We just need to go get her, talk to the police officer, and then I'll follow the procedure with the insurance." And following it, my husband was like, "Babe, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm good. I got insurance. I know what to do. It's going to be okay." And that stopped me from spiraling, knowing that I had all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. And as business owners, which we were talking about this earlier off camera, anxiety, and I really truly feel that anxiety comes, it's like from the fear of unknown or being underprepared. And in that situation, I had already been through it, but I was also prepared. So it checked all the boxes.
Absolutely. I grew up with a dad who was an Eagle Scout, so we're always prepared.
Yeah.
But but I think that insurance, most of the time, we think about insurance only really mattering or being important when you have a claim. But we also find insurance to be really helpful sometimes when you want to prove to your clients that you're professional. Like I would not want a pet sitter or a pooper scooper at my home who doesn't have insurance. But also sometimes it's required by contract. With our pooper scooper members, we have quite a few members who are required to list different property management companies or homeowners associations as additional insureds. And I can talk about what that means in a second. But sometimes, in order to even work on a property, you have to provide proof of insurance, or they're not going to let you come on their property and pick up the poop or manage one of the, doggy waste spots, that people manage as pooper scoopers. In order to have those on property management companies, homeowners associations, condo complexes, sometimes you have to have proof of insurance, and sometimes you have to list the property management as an additional insured. So what an additional insured is, and most common in the pet care industry, is going to be a landlord, homeowners association, or property management company. When you as a pooper scooper list a landlord on as an additional insured, if something happens on that property, the person who's injured, for example, is going to sue you as the pooper scooper or pet sitter. They're going to sue the homeowner or the owner of the dog. And they might also sue the landlord or the property management company because the injury occurred on their property. And if you list them as an additional insured and they get pulled into the lawsuit, our policy would potentially provide them with some coverage. You do end up sharing your limits with them. So the benefit is really to them, not you. So I always tell people don't add additional insureds unless you have to, but the coverage is available if you need it for a contract. On top of an additional insured, sometimes they want things that are called a waiver of subrogation or primary and non-contributory endorsement. These are extra things that come on top of an additional insured, and they're usually required by contract. Otherwise, nobody even cares about it unless someone tells you you have to have it. A waiver of subrogation basically means that the insured, the pet sitter or the pooper scooper, and their insurance company is waiving the right to subrogate, which is just a fancy word for sue, the insurance company of the additional insured. So if they're partially at fault, they can't go after them. They are waiving that right to sue that other insurance company. The primary and non-contributory endorsement basically means that the insured pet sitter or pooper scooper's insurance is going to be primary. Those limits are going to get used up first before we go after the insurance that's available through the additional insured's personal or their individual insurance. So those are extra things. So if you get to have a contract and they require an additional insured or they ask for those extra endorsements, we can help you out with that at Pet Sitters Associates. And we really pride ourselves on turning around Accord certificates of insurance, which is a document that sometimes additional insureds want. We really try to get those turned around for people really quickly because we know that they're requiring it maybe before you can work there or maybe before they will pay you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, because I was just trying to rack my brain, I'm like, what kind of situations would happen? And two things popped into my head. Um, Say, for instance, is there coverage for if we're offering like a deodorizer or a sanitizer? And I don't know, like,
You damage the grass or something like
yeah,
that. So
damage the
under
grass.
the basic membership, the property damage portion does provide coverage for real property of the insured or of the client. So I'm using air quotes when I say real property because real property is basically the house itself and anything attached to the house. And when I say house, I am also going to say grass. That's included in that because it's part of the all-encompassing area of the house. So that's going to be covered under our basic membership. We do offer an optional coverage for an extra $100 that provides coverage for damage to their personal property. And I'm using air quotes on personal property, but that is basically anything you can pick up and move around. So for a pet sitter going into a client's home, if they were to knock over a vase or the TV or something like that, there's up to $10,000 in coverage for that breakage. And then for a pooper scooper, it might be if you were to knock over a statue in the backyard. That might be considered personal property because technically you can pick up that statue and move it around. So, or if you have access to their garage and there's something in the garage that you might break. Also, in our what we call, I know it's a really lengthy name, broadened property damage coverage and bond is an extra $100, and it provides coverage for theft, breakage, and mysterious disappearance of the personal property of the pet owner. And it covers everybody on your membership for that $100. You don't have to pay for each individual thing. The breakage coverage is pretty straightforward. You knock over something inside the house or in the backyard that's considered personal property, and there's up to $10,000 in coverage.
So, if you get accused of stealing something, that's where this kicks in.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different on the theft portion of it. So the breakage portion is pretty straightforward. On the theft portion, if you, as the owner of the business, Erica, if you are accused of stealing something, we're going to defend you in court up to $10,000 in defense costs. But if you are actually guilty, we find you on videotape selling that stolen item at the pawn shop, we're not going to provide you with coverage for the theft, and the defense costs would cease as soon as we realize that you're guilty. The reason for that is we aren't giving the owner of the business carte blanche to go rob their clients, right? You can control your own sticky fingers, but you can't control what other people do. So if an employee or independent contractor working for you were to steal from your clients, we will provide up to $10,000 for the items that were stolen. And we will also provide up to $10,000 in defense costs. And the defense costs when it comes to an employee is once we know the employee is guilty, defense costs for them cease. They've committed a crime. But we will continue to defend you as the owner of the business if you are being pulled into the lawsuit because you hired the person that stole from you. So there's defense costs always for the owner of the business, assuming they didn't steal anything, up to $10,000. And the theft for the employee, the defense cost for the employee theft just kind of comes down to, did they actually steal it? Are we defending the owner and all of that? I know it's a little confusing, but when we're looking at it is we're defending your business for things that you can't control, the theft of an employee, but we're not going to provide you with coverage for stealing from your client because you can control that.
No, that makes sense because I think that's one of the big stressors of hiring staff is because when you are the business owner, you're controlling everything, the quality, you know exactly what's going on. But then when you start expanding, you can't control people. You just have to have good faith in them, and so having that coverage to know, like as the business owner, we're covered as long as we're not, bad, we're not doing bad things. And then if we get a rogue employee, then they can be covered until they're found guilty, and then they can be let go.
Yeah, and we don't require background checks. The only thing is if you hire somebody who you know has a background of being convicted or charged with theft, we're not going to cover that individual person for theft. We will still cover them for breakage and everything else. But if you as the business owner decide that you're going to take on that quote unquote risk of hiring somebody who has a potential background of stealing, that's going to kind of fall on you. But we don't require background checks. Sometimes when you get a bond or this kind of coverage, you do have to have background checks, but we don't go there.
So for the HOA, the big one that I serviced, they did require background checks. They wanted to see that for the people that I had on staff. I did have a question about the limited, like the liability.
Mhm.
Off the top of your head, do you know the numbers of the general liability that you see frequently HOAs or commercial properties want at a minimum?
Typically, they're going to require 1 mil, 2 mil limits, which is what most general liability policies provide, at least most of the associations. When you buy a commercial general liability policy, your insurance agent, in my mind, a good insurance agent is going to offer you what the highest limits are available. And most insurance companies are going to max out at $1 million per occurrence or $2 million annual aggregate. That's what I mean by 1 mil, 2 mil. But you can buy lower limits and usually save a little money, not through us. We only offer the highest limits, but through like a State Farm or an independent insurance agent, you might be able to get 300, 600 or 500 mil, 1 mil lower limits and save a little bit of money. In my opinion, the amount of money you're going to save is not worth it. Just get the 1 mil, 2 mil, and then that's going to satisfy the large majority of contract requirements. If you do have a contract requirement that asks for higher than 1 mil, 2 mil, you typically can get what's called an excess or umbrella policy. They're not the same thing, but they're similar. Both of them will increase the limits that are available. So if you have a contract that requires 3 mil, 5 mil, or something like that, you can get an additional policy on top of it to get higher limits. Those are not cheap policies. They usually start around $500 per million plus fees and taxes, and then they can go up from there. So I would recommend if you have a contract that's asking for the higher limits that you speak with the additional insured and find out if it's really, really required for a pooper scooper.
Why would they want that much liability?
So I find that a lot of homeowners and property management companies work with third-party vendors to manage their insurance requirements. Some of these companies are like Compliance Depot, Net Vendor, Vive. And what they do, they're national companies, and they work with homeowners associations, property management companies to confirm that all contractors coming onto their property are insured to whatever limits they require and meet all of their requirements. And this is sometimes when that waiver of subrogation and whatnot come into play. So a lot of times I tell the pet sitter or the pooper scooper, don't talk to the third party vendor because they just have a checklist that says everybody who comes onto the property needs to check these boxes. And those probably make perfectly good sense for true contractors coming onto the property. When I say contractors, I mean like home builders, remodeling contractors, people putting on roofs, that kind of contractor. Those people, yeah, we want good limits. We want all the bells and whistles before they come on to our homeowners association and start doing work. But pooper scoopers sometimes get lumped in with the contractors, and the requirements are kind of silly. So if you talk with the additional insured directly and say, hey, this is the insurance that I currently have, is this not enough for you? Do I really need to jump through all these additional hoops? And if they say yes, then that might be a time to do a little cost benefit analysis and decide if it's really worth working for them or not in order to get all of those extra requirements.
Okay. All right. So something I thought about just with the commercial space with say for instance, a dog waste station is getting installed
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, the pooper scooper's like, I ain't calling Miss Dig. I'm just gonna install this station and then boom, hits a I don't know, a gas line or something that's shallow enough. Is that covered?
It would fall under the property damage section. So yeah, there would be covered up to $1 million under that kind of property damage.
Okay. All right, that's good to know.
Although
Okay.
I'm going to say, please call first. Please don't.
Yes.
Because not only could you potentially damage something, but you could also electrocute yourself. So call the digger's hotline or whatever before you do. That's a very important thing.
It is. Definitely call like either you do it or the community itself needs to have that facilitated, but you definitely want to make sure that wherever you're digging is clear. But it's good to
Yeah.
know that if something happens, that the insurance can kick in. Okay,
Yeah.
so now say for instance, a claim needs to happen. How does the claim process work?
So with Pet Sitters Associates, there's two ways to submit a claim. The easiest way is via the website. So as I mentioned earlier, when you join, you create a username and password for our member login section. Within there, there's a link that just says submit a claim. If you click on that button, it pre-fills in your membership information for you. And all we need to get the claim submitted is your contact information, which again is going to automatically pre-fill in. We need the date of the incident. We need the contact information for the owner of the dog or the owner of the property where the claim occurred, and then just a brief description of what happened. To get the claim started, we don't need invoices or anything like that. This is just sort of getting a form filled out and sent into the insurance company to get the ball rolling. You can also do it over the phone. There is a phone number on your member certificate that you can call to speak with a data entry claims person. These are not claims adjusters. They're just going to ask you the same questions that that website form would fill out. From there, the information collected is sent into the insurance company along with a copy of your member certificate. At that point, a claims adjuster is assigned. Typically, a claims adjuster is assigned within 2 or 3 business days. And then that person is the person who's going to reach out to the member to get more information, like copies of invoices, photos if they have them, all of that kind of stuff. Simple claims are usually closed out pretty quickly within a couple of weeks. More complex claims, ones that maybe the dog got injured and there's follow-up care, that will take a little bit longer. And obviously, if there's a lawsuit, that can take years sometimes to deal with. But we really try to get them turned around really quickly. But this process is very smooth. The claims people are not there on Saturday and Sunday. So if you submit a claim over the weekend on the website, it's going to go into the insurance company on Monday. But we do try to get that taken care of really quickly because we know that you want to get your money back if you're out of pocket.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, speaking of that, actually, I should jump in on something else on claims. This doesn't come up with pooper scoopers quite as often, but as a general rule of thumb, the pet sitter member should not make payment on anything until having spoken with an insurance company claims adjuster. The only time when it's okay for someone to make a payment right away is when it's a true emergency and the owner is not available to make payment. So if a pet sitter has a dog in their care get injured and the owner's on a cruise in Europe, it's totally okay for that pet sitter to take the dog to the vet and pay that vet bill. That dog needs to get taken care of, and we know the vet is going to require payment. So that's fine. But if the vet is willing to wait until the owner gets home to pay, or if they have a credit card on file, you always want to go that route first before the pet sitter makes payment. And the reason for that is there's this legal term called voluntary payments. It's not really an insurance thing, more of a legal thing. But if a pet sitter member or an insured in general makes payment on something on a voluntary basis, it can kind of make it look like they're admitting negligence, and it can cause some complications from a legal perspective. So to avoid that, you should never make a payment on something unless it is a true emergency. But the other reason for this tip of mine is not just that, but also if you pay something and it's determined that for whatever reason it's not covered by your insurance or not covered in full, you now have to have that very awkward, uncomfortable conversation with the pet owner of, hi, I paid this. Can you pay me back? Or you're just stuck out of pocket. But if you have it so that the client is always paying everything, the insurance company will pay them accordingly. And then if it's not paid in full, you can have a conversation with your client if you want about helping them out beyond what your insurance paid. Although you want to have this conversation after the claim is closed, fully closed, before you start having any conversations with your client outside of insurance. It's just a lot cleaner that way versus the other way.
And then do you want to do this in writing? Have the
Yes,
conversation in writing.
documentation, writing. So if you have a claim, photographs, documentation, if there are witnesses, get their contact information, document. That's like the number one rule of insurance. If you have any communications with the client or the injured party after it happens, especially if it's text messages or anything, keep photos of those, screenshot your text messages so that we have that. But in general, once a claim is submitted, my recommendation would be to tell the client, hey, this has been submitted to my insurance company. Let's just talk with the claims adjusters, kind of pass it off to them. And then they can be the bad guy if needed and all of that kind of good stuff.
Okay. All right, cool. Man, you gave such good information. I love it. Um, we're getting at we've been on the chat for like an hour. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do have like just two little questions.
Okay.
Jamie Coons actually wanted to know, he's one of our local, or not local, he's one of our community members. He wanted to know, does Pet Sitter Associates have any type of grant for small business owners?
We do not. I would recommend checking with your local small business bureau. Every area is different, but a lot of small business bureaus offer grants for small business, and sometimes they offer either free or inexpensive legal advice. So sometimes you can get a lawyer to help you write a contract or review your contract for a discount through your small business bureau. So I would recommend that. We do offer some discounts with different associations. I don't know if many of your members are part of the APAWS group, the Association for Professional Animal Waste Specialists, but we do offer a discount through them. So if you're a member of them, they will give you a discount code. And when you join Pet Sitters Associates, I think you can save $25. So we do offer some discounts with different groups.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I would like to get you in touch with William about, because he's looking for he wants to be able to pass off discounts to the community members. So
Absolutely. And we love doing that. It's something that the association can certainly work with you on. So anytime we can do anything like that to help out with the costs, we're happy to offer a discount.
which is nice. So yeah, I'll make sure to get you two in touch. And then, is there any frequent pain points that you see while working with the small business owners throughout your years?
So somewhat insurance related, somewhat not insurance related. I think one of the challenges with small businesses is when people try to grow too quickly or do too much. So I'm a big proponent of doing one thing really, really, really well So sometimes you find that things are going well, or they have a client start asking them to do extra things, and suddenly you went from being a pooper scooper and now you're like a landscaper, or you were a pooper scooper, but oh wow, how am I like babysitting these people's children while they're in the
Right.
backyard? So I would say know your strengths, know what you want your business to be, and know what you want your business not to be. So making sure that this is what I want to do. I'm not going to do those other things. I'm just going to do this. Or if I do want to expand, I want to make sure that I'm doing it at a good pace and that I know what I'm doing as I enter into a new line of business or offering a new service. And then also check with your insurance company to make sure that that new service is covered. So if you suddenly start doing something like you are doing landscaping, or you're uh, putting up a fence around their yard or something, that's not pooper scooper. That's not pet care. So our policy is not going to cover you, and most policies aren't going to cover you when you get beyond what you initially said. So as you expand and grow, make sure that you're looking at your insurance to make sure that it's still the right fit for you and that you have coverage for what you need.
Yeah, that makes sense because I get asked all the time, like, "Can you come in and clean my house?" Or um, do you do any bush trimming?" Or I could see like if you're setting posts for the dog waste station, and they're like, "Hey, I seen you do that. Can you set a post for my fence?"
Yeah. It's like, not really.
No, no. All right. No, I'm glad you said that because I actually I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of trying to do way too much, and I get the new ideas come and it's like, "Oh, I could take out these people's trash cans. I could clean out their trash cans. I could offer this deodorizer, this sanitizer. What about the grass green spray for grass that's brown or whatever?" And then I started thinking about all the different avenues, but then you start spreading yourself too thin, and that's kind of what I've been focusing on is just reining it back and focusing on what is the goal here? What do we want to get really, really good at?
Absolutely. And then you're a niche. I love our Pooper Scooper members, partially because in general, you guys have great business names and they always crack me up. Uh, and it's just a wonderful group of people. They have great questions. Everyone's really friendly. We have quite a few Pooper Scooper members and Pet Sitters Associates. I know the name says Pet Sitters Associates, but we love our Pooper Scoopers.
We do have the best names. It cracks me up.
But you know, if you're going to pick up poop for a living, you got to have fun with it.
Exactly. Well, this was so much fun, Colleen. I truly appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Erica, for having me on. I am passionate about making sure that pet care professionals have the right insurance in place. And if anyone has any questions, Pet Sitters Associates website again is petsitllc.com. If you reach out to them, you're probably going to talk with Elizabeth, their office manager. She's fantastic. And if you have questions for her that she can't answer, she'll send you my way. But I am going to go ahead and give you my email address and phone number as well. So my email address is Coleen, Colleen _Giles Harris, GILES HARRIS at rpsins.com. So I don't actually work for Pet Sitters Associates. I work for a company called RPS, but I underwrite their insurance program. And my direct dial phone number is 715-852-1282, typically available from 7 to 4 or 5 Central Time. So feel free to call or email if you have any questions, or reach out to Pet Sitters Associates and Elizabeth can give you a hand.
All right, perfect. And then I'll have you email that to me so I can go ahead and include it in the show notes for
Perfect.
those that are like, I need to just copy and paste it so I don't mess it up.
Yeah, all those S's, sometimes people get confused too. It's hard to understand.
Well, so thank you guys so much for tuning in with Colleen and I. She was just so informative. So if you guys have any questions or concerns, or if you want to learn more information, definitely to go ahead and check the show notes. I do try to drop an episode every single Monday. So please stay tuned. If you haven't liked and subscribed or left a Google review or anything like that, I would truly appreciate it if you would. And thank you again, Colleen. And until next time, bye.
Thank you.